Welcome back to the deep dive. Tonight we're going to do something a little different. I want you to imagine a very specific Monday night.
Oh, yeah, set the scene.
Right, so it's raining outside, a cold, steady, late November rain. It's dark. The vibe here is not, some mystical temple or hallowed ground. It's really just
Unfinished chores.
exactly unfinished chores. There are dishes in the sink, you're tired, the house is a little chilly, and you have that nagging feeling that you forgot to buy something at the store.
Yeah, like maybe batteries.
Maybe batteries, maybe eggs. You just want to curl up and sleep.
Right, it's the kind of night where the absolute last thing you want to do is sit down, focus your mind, and, channel a multidimensional consciousness that speaks to the authority of the ages. It's a very human, very mundane setting.
It really is. But that is the exact setting for the material we are covering today. We're looking at a moment where the Twilight Zone essentially meets the grocery store. We are diving into session 304 of the Early Sessions Book 7 of the Seth material.
Which is such a fascinating entry point, because it bridges this gap that so many people struggle with, right? The gap between high, lofty philosophy and the literal laundry list.
Absolutely. And just for the record, to ground us in time here, the date of record is November 28, 1966. It is 9:00 p.m. Jane Roberts, the author and medium, and her husband Rob are just exhausted. They've had a total scramble of a week. And yet Seth, the personality Jane channels, comes through with a session that is split right down the middle.
It's a perfect dichotomy, honestly. On one side, you have the first half of the session, which is this deep, almost chilling philosophical treatise on reality, illusion, and the nature of the self. I mean, it's high-level metaphysics that challenges the very ground you walk on.
And then the second half.
A psychic experiment involving a shopping list. Literally, brown sugar, eggs, batteries.
I just love that contrast. So our mission for this deep dive is to connect those two worlds. We're going to unpack Seth's shortcut to understanding physical reality, which he calls the book analogy, and then we're going to analyze the psychic experiment to see how consciousness actually filters information.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
And before we get started, just a quick mandatory reminder for everyone listening. This deep dive will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to explore the ideas, impartially report on the content provided in the sources, and let you decide what to make of it.
Right. We aren't endorsing any specific viewpoints, just trying to convey the ideas contained in the original material. So grab a warm drink, maybe some scrambled eggs if you're hungry, though we'll get to why that's funny later, and let's get into the heavy stuff first.
Let's do it.
So Seth opens this session with a statement that kind of stops you in your tracks. He says, and I'm paraphrasing the beginning here, but essentially, the physical universe is both real and not real.
Which is the classic paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
But he doesn't just leave it as this vague Zen koan to confuse you. He explains the mechanics of why. He says you create physical matter and then perceive it.
Okay, I want to pause right there because that flips our standard logic completely upside down. I mean, usually we think the chair exists, right? Light hits the chair, the light hits my eye, therefore I see the chair. Perception follows existence.
Exactly.
Like the universe was here before I got here, and it's going to be here after I leave.
Precisely. That is the standard materialist view. But Seth is arguing for a projectionist view here. He's saying that consciousness exists first. We project the idea of the chair, the room, the rain outward into physical matter, and then we use our physical senses to perceive what we've already created.
It's a feedback loop.
A total feedback loop. We are painting the landscape and then walking through it, marveling at the trees we just painted.
It reminds me of a dream. In a dream, you create the monster chasing you, but you also create the fear you feel, and you create the legs you use to run away.
Right.
It feels incredibly real while you're in it, but it's entirely a projection of the self.
That's a very close analogy, actually, and one Seth uses quite often in the material. But here, he adds a really important caveat about purpose. He says, if there were no purpose in the creation of physical matter, it would not exist and you would not perceive it. That is, it would not exist even as an illusion.
That's key.
Yeah.
Because usually when people hear someone say, oh, life is an illusion, they immediately think, well, nothing matters. It's totally nihilistic.
Exactly. But Seth is saying it's an illusion with a purpose. It's not just some cosmic trick designed to confuse us. It's a purposeful construction. If it didn't serve a function for our development, what Seth calls value fulfillment, we wouldn't be bothering with it at all.
We wouldn't be doing the work of holding it together.
Right.
Value fulfillment. That's a term that comes up a lot in Seth's work. How would you define that for a listener who might be new to this specific phrasing?
Sure. Think of it as the drive for any consciousness to express its absolute potential. So A rose seed has the potential to be a rose, right? Its value fulfillment is the actual process of growing, blooming, and experiencing being a rose.
It isn't about moral value then.
No, not necessarily like being a good person or a bad person, but about the fulfillment of capacity. Seth is saying we create this physical illusion because it is the absolute best way for us to fulfill our potential, to learn, to grow, to experience intense limitations, and then overcome them.
Okay, so we are here to learn. The classroom might be fake, in a sense, but the lesson is entirely real.
Yes.
But then Seth takes this concept of illusion into territory that is, frankly, it's a bit disturbing if you don't read it carefully. He starts talking about life and death from a very, very high altitude.
He does, and this is where that chilling vibe really comes in.
He says, and I want to quote this exactly because it's heavy. He says, "For those who may seem like gods to you, killing is no crime, for there is no such thing as even the illusion of death."
It is a massively provocative statement.
So
It's meant to be.
it just sounds incredibly cold. Killing is no crime. I mean, if you're hearing that for the first time, you're probably thinking, is this justifying murder? Is he saying war doesn't matter?
And it absolutely does sound cold to the human ear. But we have to look at the perspective he is speaking from. He's speaking from a level of consciousness we call the entity level, or the whole self, where the continuity of the soul is just a given fact.
Right.
It's not a theory to them. It's not some religious hope they cling to. It is an observable, mechanical fact of existence.
Yeah.
From that perspective, death as we fear it, total annihilation, the end of the self, it simply doesn't exist. It's like an actor leaving the stage.
Okay, right. If Hamlet dies in the play, the audience cries. It's tragic. But the actor, let's say Laurence Olivier, goes home, washes off the fake blood, and has dinner. The killing in the play wasn't a crime in the reality of the actor. It was just a plot point.
That is the exact analogy. To the gods or the higher entities, our physical lives are plays we've written and acted in ourselves. Ending the play isn't a crime, it's just the curtain dropping. However, and this is a massive crucial however, Seth immediately grounds this concept. He knows exactly who he's speaking to. He's speaking to humans who are inside the play.
Right, because I am not Laurence Olivier having dinner. I am Hamlet, bleeding out on the stage. It feels extremely real to me.
Exactly. And Seth acknowledges that. He says, you cannot rid yourselves completely of the illusion while you are within physical bodies. You can't just pretend it doesn't matter. You are quite literally wired to feel it.
So we can't just walk around saying, oh, nothing is real and acting like sociopaths.
No. And this is where the ethics actually come in. He says, therefore, within this context, you must treat your living things gently. They are actualities within your system.
I really like that distinction. It is an illusion from the outside, but it is an actuality within our specific system.
Yes. It feels real. It hurts. It loves. It bleeds. Seth says, philosophical tenets at your level must be carefully filled in by constructive emotions.
Constructive emotions. That's a phrase I definitely want to underline for you listening.
He is strongly warning against using high-minded metaphysics to justify cruelty or apathy. You can't say, oh, reality is fake, so I can just be a jerk to my neighbor. The mailbox you smash might be an illusion, but your intent to destroy it is very real.
The emotion behind the action is real.
Precisely. Seth is saying that even if this is a game or a play, the way we play it matters fundamentally. The quality of our consciousness matters.
Which leads us perfectly to the core metaphor of this session. And I think this is one of the most helpful analogies Seth ever gave to explain why we should care about a quote-unquote fake reality. He compares physical existence to an excellent book.
Yes, an excellent book given to you by a teacher.
So imagine you are reading a really, really good book. You are totally engrossed. You identify with the main character. You cry when they cry. You laugh when they laugh. You have completely suspended your disbelief. You are in the world of the novel.
You are immersed, as Seth puts it. You are living the story. You have forgotten momentarily that you are sitting in a chair in your living room.
Yeah.
You are in Victorian England, or you're on Mars, or wherever the book is set.
Right. Now imagine someone taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, wake up. That's just a book. It's just paper and ink. None of those people are real. It's just wood pulp.
Right. Now, the spell is broken. You know it's a book. You realize the literal nature of the object in your hands. But, this is Seth's main point, does realizing it's a book mean you should throw it in the trash?
No, of course not. You want to finish the story. You want to know what happens to the characters.
Exactly. Seth says, because you realize that you are reading such a book and acting out the part of the main character, this does not mean that you can afford to throw the book away, nor that you should refuse to read it.
I just love that. It is the ultimate antidote to nihilism. Because I think sometimes people get into the spiritual stuff, they realize the world is an illusion. They go, well, then what's the point? I should just go meditate in a cave and try to escape the cycle of existence.
That is such a common trap. It's what we often call spiritual bypassing in modern terms, trying to skip the messy human experience because it's somehow not real or low vibration. But Seth is saying no.
Mhm.
You were given this book by a teacher, which he strongly implies is your own inner self, specifically to read it.
To experience it fully.
Yes, to feel the rain on that Monday night, to feel the frustration of the unfinished chores, that texture, that grit is the point.
And he adds a layer to this metaphor that I found totally fascinating. He says the teacher of the inner self is reading another book while we read this one.
Which really hints at the multidimensional nature of the soul.
Yeah.
We are the part of the self that is intensely focused on the physical reality book. But there are other parts of us focused on other books, other realities, perhaps non-physical ones. But our job right here, right now, is to read this one with attention and care. We are essentially the eyes and ears of the soul in this specific dimension.
And this brings us to a specific critique Seth makes regarding Zen philosophy. Now, usually Seth is pretty respectful of other traditions, but he points out what he calls a tragic flaw in some interpretations of Zen.
Yes, specifically regarding the concept of existence as a joke.
Yeah, I've heard this a lot in spiritual circles, the cosmic joke, the idea that because reality is illusory, it's just absurd. It's all just a big laugh.
Seth pushes back really hard on this. He says, I do not like the word joke, relevant or irrelevant for that matter. It can lead to unfeeling.
It can lead to unfeeling. That connects right back to what we were saying about treating living things gently. If you truly think it's all just a joke, you stop empathizing. You stop caring if someone is suffering because, hey, it's just a joke, man. Lighten up.
You detach way too much. You become cynical. You lose the richness of the emotional experience. If you're watching a movie and you just sit there heckling the screen saying, oh, it's just light projected on a wall, that blood is corn syrup.
Yeah.
You're entirely missing the point of the movie.
You're ruining it.
You are technically correct, sure, but experientially you are failing.
You're ruining the movie for yourself and probably everyone else sitting in the theater trying to watch it.
You aren't enlightened, you're just annoying.
Yeah.
Seth wants us to have the playfulness of knowing it's a game, sure, but the seriousness of actually playing it well.
So we're reading the book. We're not treating it as a joke, but we are exploring. And Seth talks about the nature of this exploration. He mentions the entity or the whole self, and he confirms that this whole self exists now.
Right, it's not something you magically become after you die or after 10 lifetimes of perfect karma. You don't somehow graduate into being your entity. You are in contact with it right now. It is reading the book through you.
But he says something really interesting about the destination here, or rather the lack of one. He quotes a friend of theirs, I think he's referring to a philosopher friend or maybe just a common sentiment floating around, who says there is no place to go.
Yes, no place to go, which sounds almost depressing if you think of it in terms of being stuck, like being in a cosmic waiting room forever. But Seth frames it as continuing creation. There is no final finish line where you just stop existing or stop learning. The exploration itself creates the destination.
The exploration is also a creation. That is deep. So we aren't walking down a pre-paved road towards some golden city. We are laying the pavement as we walk.
Exactly. And because there is no place to go in terms of a physical location, the heaven isn't a GPS coordinate you can map. The going is internal. It is an expansion of awareness. It's becoming more capable of creating and perceiving entirely new realities.
Which brings us to the topic of out-of-body experiences, or OBEs. Seth brings this up right in the context of practicality. Again, he's grounding the woo-woo here. He says, when you have out-of-body experiences, you can become aware of the nature of inner reality more directly.
But listen to the reason why he suggests this. It is not to escape. It's not to say, goodbye, cruel world, I'm out of here. He says, this knowledge helps you use and direct physical laws, not ignore them.
Wait, so leaving the physical body helps you be better in the physical body?
That's the paradox of it. When you step outside the system, even briefly, in a really lucid dream or a trance state, you see how the system actually works. You see the hidden mechanics of the book, so to speak. And when you come back, you can read it better. You can use the physical laws more efficiently because you finally understand their source.
It's like looking at the underlying code of a video game. Once you know how the code works, you can play the game with so much more skill. You know where the glitches are. You know where the power-ups are. You know that the wall isn't actually solid code.
Precisely. You become a master of the physical reality because you understand the non-physical foundation of it. You stop fighting against the illusion and start working with it.
Before we move on to the experiment part of the session, there is one very practical piece of advice Seth gives to Rob and Jane here that I found really interesting. Apparently, there was a plan for a community that they were thinking of joining.
Yes, remember, this was the 1960s. Intentional communities, communes, utopian groups, they were very much in the zeitgeist. Everyone wanted to buy a farm and live together in harmony.
And Seth says, don't do it.
He is very clear on this. He says, you should not now join a community of the sort that is being planned.
Why? Is he against community as a concept? Is he antisocial?
Not in principle, no. But for them, at this specific stage of their development, he says their work must be primarily a solitary one.
Relative isolation.
Yes. Their psychic abilities, Jane's channeling, Rob's art, and his meticulous support needed a stable, private environment to incubate properly. He says Rupert's abilities, and Rupert is Seth's name for Jane, must be nurtured in such a way that stability is maintained.
That's really good advice for any creative person, I think. Sometimes you want to be part of a big group, you want the social validation and the energy, but sometimes the work just requires you to shut the door and be alone.
It creates a pressure cooker effect. If you dissipate that energy socially, talking about your ideas all day, arguing about whose turn it is to wash the dishes in the commune, you might lose the intense focus needed for a real breakthrough. They needed a highly controlled environment to bring this massive amount of material through.
Okay, speaking of breakthroughs and eggs, let's shift gears completely. We've established that reality is a cosmic book, life isn't a joke, and we're creating our path as we go. Now, let's look at how this high-level, multidimensional consciousness deals with a literal grocery list.
This is my favorite part. Part 3 of our discussion, the experiment.
Set the scene for us again. What is the actual setup here?
It's a standard envelope test, which was something researchers back then used to test clairvoyance. Rob, earlier that day, Monday, had written out a shopping list. Jane never saw it. Rob folded it up, put it between pieces of cardboard so you couldn't see through it even if you held it up to the light, and sealed it inside double envelopes.
So it is a completely blind test. Jane holds the sealed envelope to her forehead, goes into a trance, and Seth speaks, describing what is inside.
Correct. And we have to remember the context we started the show with. It's been raining all day. Jane had a scramble of errands to run downtown, the post office, the art store. She is tired. She probably just wants to watch TV and turn her brain off.
And the object inside the envelope is a list that says mundane things like cash check, mail package, buy batteries, Bridger sugar, meaning brown sugar, and 12 eggs.
Half a dozen eggs, presumably.
So Jane goes into her trance, and the very first thing Seth says is, a scramble.
A scramble, as of events.
Now, Seth says scramble of events, but Rob immediately connects this to scrambled eggs.
It's a classic association. Rob notes in his records that they actually had scrambled eggs for breakfast the day before. But Seth clarifies later. He says, I do not know if it refers to a scramble of lines, events, or perhaps eggs. The term scramble is my impression.
This is what I love about how psychic data works. It's not like a fax machine where you just get a crisp PDF of the document. It's highly impressionistic. Scramble. It could be the literal eggs on the list. It could be the frantic scrambled day Jane had running those errands in the rain. It could be the eggs they ate yesterday. It's kind of all of them at once.
It is a bundle of associations. The word scramble is the thread that ties the physical eggs, the memory of breakfast, and the emotional state of the day all together. It shows that consciousness doesn't organize things neatly by shopping list items. It organizes by feeling and association. The psychic hit lands on the word that bridges multiple realities.
Okay, next hit. Seth says blues and yellows, strong colors.
Now, the list itself is written on standard white paper. So if you were just reading the text through the envelope with, like, Superman X-ray vision, you would say white paper, black ink. And if you heard blues and yellows, you might think, well, that's a miss, but wait.
Here is where it gets really fun. Rob looks at Jane's supplementary list, the one she actually made for herself that day to carry around. She wrote it on yellow paper.
And she used a dark blue pen.
But there is an even better connection than that. On Rob's target list, inside the envelope, it says, buy batteries.
And Jane actually bought those batteries that day. Rob had forgotten them, but she remembered while she was out. And what did the physical batteries look like?
They were these transistor radio batteries with a, quote, strong red, blue, and yellow design.
So the psychic impression picks up the visual of the object mentioned on the list, the batteries, not just the written word batteries. It literally sees the blue and yellow of the packaging.
That is just fascinating. It's like remote viewing the physical object referenced by the writing, not reading the writing itself.
Exactly. It completely bypasses the written word and goes straight to the reality of the object. It's like if I wrote the word fire on a piece of paper and put it in an envelope and you psychically felt heat. You aren't reading the text. You're sensing the concept. The consciousness zoomed in on the batteries item, traveled to the memory of the actual batteries Jean bought that afternoon, and saw the vibrant colors.
Okay, let's look at the next one. Seth says an oval, the shape of an oval rug, for example.
Now look at Rob's list. He had written small tacks. And to indicate the specific size of the tacks he needed, what did he draw?
He drew a little oval.
A literal oval shape right there on the paper next to the word.
Okay, so that is a direct visual hit. That is seeing the ink on the page. But then Seth gets abstract again. He describes something he calls the package and the cross.
Right, he says, also the impression of something divided into 4 divisions fairly equally. This way, you see. And Jane, while in trance, actually lifts her finger and draws a plus sign or a cross in the air.
A cross. Now, there is no cross drawn on the shopping list.
Not drawn on the paper, no. But one of the items written down is mail package.
And how did Rob wrap that package before Jane took it?
With heavy string, crossing right over the center, dividing the box into 4 equal quadrants.
Oh, wow. So Jane, in trance, traces the exact shape of the string on the package that she physically mailed that day.
Which perfectly connects back to the text item, mail package.
It's so layered. It's honestly like a detective story. But then there are the misses, or, well, what look like misses at first glance. Seth starts talking about a photograph.
Yes. He gets very, very specific here. He says, the impression is certainly of some kind of photograph here.
Yeah.
A woman and child. Marie Tubbs and a baby. In Florida.
Now, I was looking at the Target list going, no. There is no photo of Marie Tubbs here. This is a shopping list for eggs and brown sugar. You are way off base, Seth.
Right. A seeming failure of the experiment.
Yeah.
But let's trace the thread the way Seth's consciousness does. The package that Jane mailed, the one with the string cross, who was it for?
It was for their friends, the Bernards.
And where had the Bernards just been?
They had just visited Florida.
And who lives in Florida?
Marie Tubbs.
Exactly. So the mind leaps from mail package to Bernards to Florida to Marie Tubbs.
That is wild. It's like the psychic internet just clicked on 3 hyperlinks in a rapid row.
That is a perfect analogy for it. Psychic data works by pure association. It doesn't care about the physical isolation of the envelope. It follows the emotional and mental connections of the people involved. The Florida connection was highly active, or live, in their minds, because the Bernards had just visited there. So when Seth touched on the concept of the package, the Florida Marie Tubbs data file just automatically opened up.
It really makes you realize how interconnected all our thoughts are beneath the surface. We think we are just thinking about one isolated thing like, oh, I need to buy stamps. But underneath, there's this whole massive web of friends, travel, Florida, old memories.
And that is exactly what Seth was trying to demonstrate with this exercise. Even though Jane felt the experiment was poor when she woke up because she didn't just read the list word for word like a parlor trick, Seth was showing that consciousness is a vast web.
It is the scramble of events.
Precisely. The scramble wasn't just chaos. It was the network of reality itself.
So, pulling way back here, what is the big takeaway from all this? We have the profound cosmic book analogy, and we have the mundane psychic shopping list. How do these two halves fit together in this deep dive?
I think they fit together absolutely perfectly. The first part of the session tells us that we are reading a story, a physical life that we actively created. We are immersed in it. We are the actor on the stage, taking it very seriously.
And the second part shows us that the story isn't just a linear sequence of words on a page. It's associative. It's a multi-dimensional web of connections.
And that the inner self, the one handing us the book to read, has access to all the footnotes, all the cross-references, all the backstory. When Jane did the experiment, she wasn't just seeing ink on paper in an envelope. She was seeing the entire experience of the day. The cold rain, the yellow packaging of the batteries, the friends in Florida, the breakfast they ate. She was tapping into the whole story, not just the text.
It really validates the whole idea that we are multidimensional beings. I mean, we are dealing with very 3D problems, like I need batteries for the radio or I have to mail this box. But the way we process those problems involves this massive, invisible network of consciousness.
We are multidimensional beings having a very human, very grounded experience. We are buying eggs, but we are doing it with the consciousness of gods, to use Seth's terminology from earlier.
That is a really beautiful thought. It honestly makes the basic grocery run feel a little more epic.
It should. Every single moment of the book is worth reading, Even the boring chapters, even the chapters where it rains all day and you realize you forgot the brown sugar.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of this deep dive, but before we go, I have a final provocative thought I want to leave you with.
What's that?
If your life is a book you are reading, what chapter are you in right now? And more importantly, are you actually enjoying the character you are playing? Or are you just trying to skip ahead to the end to see how it finishes?
That's a vital question. Don't skim the pages.
Exactly. Read every single word, even the ones about the brown sugar.
Especially those.
We want to give a huge thank you to the source of this incredible material. This session came directly from the Seth material, specifically the Early Sessions Book 7, which is published by the New Awareness Network.
And if these ideas sparked something in you, if you want to understand the book you are reading on a deeper level, you really need to study the original texts yourself. We are barely scratching the surface here today.
Absolutely. You can find the books and dive so much deeper by visiting their bookstore at sethcenter.com/the early sessions. Go check it out. It is a rabbit hole entirely worth going down.
Indeed it is.
Thank you so much for listening. Good evening and enjoy your reading.
Good evening.